Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So with Battlegrounds being nearly upon us, 2 hours and 53 minutes from the time I'm recording this video, I wanted to release a video with potential week 1 MVPs. And it's very important to emphasize that this is obviously purely theoretical. And this is also not going to focus on the champions that are and forever will be the MVPs of the Battlegrounds as such. Like, obviously, your Dr. Dooms and your Human Torches and Archangels and stuff like that, those staple Battlegrounds champions are still going to fulfill a very important role in this meta. This video is going to be focusing more on some very interesting interactions or champions that specifically benefit from these nodes or will be extremely important in bypassing these things. So these aren't necessarily going to be obvious choices, all of them. And again, I'm kind of not going to be going over the staple champions. This video is much more about kind of cheeky little exploit interactions that you can benefit from. Some maybe tricks or how you can catch your opponent off guard at times, if they haven't watched this video, so on and so forth. So first things to note, because of Bulwark and because of explosive personality, the one thing that I fully expect to happen more so is that Mystic champions are going to be present. You see, because thanks to explosive personality, you can gain unlimited amount of buffs almost on your will. Therefore, fueling Mystic champions, you only have to hit opponents' block 3 or 4 times, give them 3 or 4 buffs, and then you all of a sudden make your long shot stronger. All of a sudden you can fuel up your Dr. Voodoo. All of a sudden you have Mystic Dispersion food for Dr. Doom or Diablo or whoever. So Mystic champions likely are going to be quite popular. So that is the first thing to point out. Based on that, I also think that the most potent defensive champions are likely going to be the ones that are countered the least by these Mystic champions. And with that, there's one more champion that I want to talk about at the very end, and I'm gonna leave that as a somewhat of a dessert, I suppose. I just need to find him. 1 second, where is this guy? Sorry, God, here we go. I'm gonna leave that till the end. First champion that we need to talk about is going to be Omega Sentinel. I really truly do predict Omega Sentinel to be absolute dread in this meta, because she is in her base immune to Nullify, Stagger, and Fate Seal. With Bulwark giving her armor break immunity, there's going to be virtually no way or hardly any ways to get rid of her armor buffs. There are a handful of champions that will still be able to prevent her from gaining those buffs, and then there's going to be something like Black Widow Clairvoyant with buff immunity that you can still use. But since she's immune to all forms of Nullify, now she's going to be immune to armor breaks. Also, if you do happen to hit her block, that will work nicely with her base kit, increasing the amount of armor ups that she has, therefore increasing all the other resistances. I truly believe that Omega Sentinel, especially in this meta, is going to be an absolute powerhouse. Especially because if you can't counter Omega Sentinel with majority of the Mystic champions, you still do have the Neutralize champions, so keep that in mind. Neutralize will work against Omega Sentinel. But ability accuracy reduction also doesn't really work, especially against her auto block. So she is going to be a problem on the defense, and obviously she's still a useful offensive option in my opinion. Moving on to the next one, similar story is going to be with Civil Warrior, because he's also a tech champion that heavily relies on armor buffs and is immune to Nullify, Fate Seal, and yada yada yada. That means that he's going to be basically very tanky at all times. Now, I haven't tested this, obviously this is just a speculation video, but also given the fact that when he gets his armor ups, he becomes significantly more tankier, and then on top of it, he reduces bleed and poison ability accuracy. And whenever you would do big bursts of damage, just like with Omega Sentinel, that Indestructible is going to come into play as well. I do think that Civil Warrior would and could be a champion that defensively catches people off guard. The one thing that you do have to worry about and protect Civil Warrior from, similarly with Omega Sentinel, are champions that have constant, persistent, moderately high critical hits. Because if critical hits are getting through and are not triggering the protection, but are being there all the time, then he can go down quite quickly. But I do think he will be able to stall out fights in quite a few situations. Again, this is purely theoretical, something that I would like to see to be tried. I'm considering of potentially taking this guy up to rank 3 before Battlegrounds starts, just to test it out and mess it down. If it works out, I will let you guys know. I just think it's worth mentioning again the benefit of the armor break immunity here. And here we have Penny Parker. Penny Parker always has been a defensive threat so far. However, with the release of Gallon, with the release of Hulkling, with the release of some other champions and people learning how to fight better against Penny Parker, she became somewhat less of a threat on defense. However, now, in combination with Explosive Personality and Bulwark, I don't think there are that many great options against her. I do believe there's Falcon that will work well if somebody mains Namor, and a couple of other options, some of whom I might mention later in here. But I do genuinely think that this specific meta in week 1, Penny Parker is going to be significantly more annoying than she would be in most other circumstances. So definitely be aware of Penny Parkers this time around, more so than you are normally. The next champion, and this one I think is going to be quite self-explanatory. Obviously, Killmonger. And the cool thing about Killmonger is that now he's going to be armor break immune. As we all know, as soon as Killmonger gets armor broken, pretty much most of his annoying abilities go away. Stops gaining power on debuffs, and you know, he doesn't reflect the damage anymore, and all that other stuff. Well, it's very simple. If you can't armor break Killmonger, then opponent will have to find a champion that can somehow ignore the reverb damage. But there's kind of a problem with that as well, because Killmonger in itself is a very, very tanky champion with built-in physical resistance, crit resistance, all that other stuff. So he's definitely going to take quite a lot of time. So I do think for this meta, Killmonger should be considered as a defensive staple. There's going to be no CGR to nuke him down anymore. And most of the other great options that used to work against Killmonger that we like to use will not work. For instance, Silver Surfer, again, you can't armor break Killmonger, so on and so forth. So I do think Killmonger is going to be very powerful and scary defender. Moving on, Falcon, I'm going to mention here because Falcon obviously is going to be one of the MVP attackers. And I know a lot of people do like Falcon a ton in Battlegrounds anyways, in virtually any meta. I'm not necessarily one of those people. I quite often used to leave Falcon out of my deck in majority of the other metas. But in this meta, I will definitely be running Falcon because he can bypass majority of the annoying things. He should be able to get around Bulwark, I believe. He should be able to get around Explosive Personality. He should be one of the few viable counters against Penny Parker and ignore the Explosive Personality node. So I do think that Falcon will be quite an important character to have for yourself offensively this time around. And next champion might be a surprise pick, but it is going to be Misty Knight, because Misty Knight is going to be one of those champions that I talked about before. You see, Misty Knight has access to unblockable and guaranteed crits throughout the entire fight if you have her at equilibrium, and it's super easy to maintain throughout the entire fight. Why is it important? Because in this meta, auto-block characters are likely going to be quite present, so champions like Modok, champions like Penny Parker, so on and so forth, because they can be quite dangerous to get around. And also Bulwark node itself, keep in mind, it only triggers when you take off more than 5% of your opponent's HP in a single hit. While Misty Knight will still eat through her opponents extremely quickly thanks to her guaranteed crits, and is going to completely bypass virtually all of Penny Parker's abilities, because all of her hits are going to be unblockable. Therefore, you will have no need to take her block down, and you will not have to worry about Modok's auto block. You will not have to worry about Penny Parker's auto block. So I do kind of think that Misty Knight is going to be sleeper offensive option, and she can also be somewhat of a nasty defender herself with built-in debuff shrug and built-in evades. And typically her biggest downside on defense was the small health pool, but in this case, the fact that she has smaller health pool will potentially make it easier for her to trigger Bulwark Indestructible and extend the fight and increase the potential danger that she can propose. So I do think that Misty Knight is kind of like a niche sleeper pick for this meta that I will definitely be testing out myself. Another option obviously is going to be here Gallon, because Gallon, similarly to Omega Sentinel and similarly to Civil Warrior and a few other champions, is immune to forms of Nullify, so on and so forth. And at the moment, at least in theory, again, the only proper good counters to Gallon under these circumstances would be neutralized champions. I don't think there is much else that would work really, really well against Gallon. Obviously, I might be wrong, but I just have the feeling that Gallon is going to be a big problem, offensively and defensively, because I'm not sure if his burst of damage does bypass the Indestructible. I think it probably does, in which case he's going to be one of the fastest attackers available in the game, and he's also going to be a problematic defender. So definitely be wary of Gallon. Moving on, this again is theoretical, but I do think it can potentially be a sleeper pick. Because Wong does have some defensive abilities that does make him quite annoying in certain matchups and situations. But additionally to that, Wong's signature ability has the built-in instantly nullify indestructible and immortality buffs of non-science champions and then deal a burst of damage. So I do think that can be quite helpful in this situation. On top of his blue Eldritch spell, Virtue of Valor, where whenever the opponent triggers a buff, you go unstoppable for 2 seconds and gain 4 Eldritch energy. So I think if you start with this one offensively, you're going to be dealing the burst of energy damage quicker. Hopefully you go up against somebody who's indestructible, you can trigger, instantly nullify that indestructible, feed your Mystic Dispersion, improve the speed of your cycle. So I do think that Wong potentially in this specific meta might be a bit of a sleeper pick. Again, this is all purely theoretical because I obviously haven't had a chance to test it, but I do plan on adding Wong to my deck at the very least initially, because I do have one ranked up already. Next champion, and the base principle here is quite similar to before when we talked about Killmonger, because one of the most kind of like potent ways to deal with Emma Frost typically always has been to inflict armor break upon her, and then there's not much she can do. Quite simple as that. She can't revert to her diamond form. And obviously if you have Emma Frost awakened as well, as soon as you're going to be dealing any meaningful damage to Emma Frost, she's going to go into her diamond form anyways, reducing opponent's damage. Her being stun immune could make it harder for opponents to find openings, and her reverse special attacks might actually, well, still can potentially catch people off guard, or at the very least, in most cases, inflict some, block damage or something. But the main point is that you will not be able to hit very hard against Emma Frost if she is awakened at a decent sig, because she's going to be going in her diamond form to begin with. And if she does receive any meaningful amount of damage, she's going to trigger the Indestructible from Bulwark, and she could be a potential defensive tank. This is one champion I'm really, really thinking about ranking up right now to test her out. Probably will, to be honest, because I do think that under these circumstances, it could maybe be her time to shine. Additionally, I think she could be somewhat useful offensively because of her really increased crit rate when she is in telepath form. And then just don't really throw special attacks. Just throw, your basic combos and crit a ton. and yeah, nuke down your opponents. Because she could also be useful for next dodge meta, by the way. That's going to be quite interesting. Anyhow, we'll see how it works out. But yeah, I do want to try out Emma Frost in my deck as well. Modok is one of those that is somewhat obvious. For most part, I don't think he's the toughest defender. But this time around, with him giving, having increased capabilities here, because he's if he's awakened, I believe he can increase his ability accuracy. On top of that, we have explosive personality that could pose quite few problems, combined with his very pesky auto block. And then again, the fact that he can trigger that indestructible, given the fact that it's not too easy to find openings always against Modok, could work out very well, and I'm quite interested to see how well Modok is going to do in this first meta. I do think he has the potential to be one of the more dangerous defenders this time around. And another champion that I definitely do need to shout out is Ronin. Now, this is something we actually did test earlier on my own account with practice. You see, Ronin will be able to stunlock any champion, because you can hit opponent's block 4 times, get to level 1, and then you can stunlock them forever. Yes, you will trigger the indestructible, but given that you will never waste any time baiting out opponent's special attacks, you will be able to throw your level 1 freely. I do think he's going to be able to just go on straight up and nuke a ton of champions. Now, obviously, it depends who you're going up against, because you can't do things like that to, let's say, Mallman or Kingpin or Penny Parker or Nick Fury. So there will be defenders that you cannot do this to. But unless there is a very specific set of abilities, I do think that for most of the champions, you will, in fact, be able to just stunlock them. If you hit opponent's block 4 times, give them 4 armor buffs, avoid throwing heavy attacks, because heavy attacks do remove opponent's armor ups. So just regular combos, and I do believe that you can try and stunlock your opponents and get a kind of a nuke option win. And again, I tried to go over not necessarily the staple Battlegrounds champions here, but kind of like some of the interactions that I think could be interesting, troublesome, so on and so forth. And obviously, I'm not saying don't put in Nick Fury in your deck. Put in Nick Fury in your deck. Put in Kingpin in your deck. Put in Human Torch and Archangel and all the other champions in your deck as well. What I'm trying to say with this video is that these are potentially some of the sneaky problem characters, offensively and primarily defensively. Hope you guys found this video useful. And yeah, now it's only about 2.5 hours left till Battlegrounds, and I'm so excited. I hope to see you all on my live stream. So yeah. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the next